People who love watches usually love cars, and that's why there are so many watches that take inspiration from cars. Today we're taking a look at a watch that is inspired by one of the most beautiful cars of all time, the Mercedes 300SL Gullwing. However, do they get it right? When you think about that car, it is very beautiful, but can that translate into a watch? Let's flip the camera and take a look at the Treiber T54SL. Watch is inspired by automotive design. It works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. There are a lot of watches out there that take inspiration from automotive design. However, there are a few watches only that take most of their inspiration from automotive design. And I would say this watch takes a majority of its inspiration from a specific car, and that is the Mercedes 300SL Gullwing, which is a beautiful car from Mercedes, obviously a vintage car that I think is one of the best looking cars of all time, but this takes a lot of inspiration from that car. A lot of that inspiration goes into the case and in the dial. The dial is meant to look like one of the gauges from the gauge cluster of the 300SL. I think there's only one mistake that I would have done if I were trying to do what they were doing here, is I wouldn't have put the date. They put the date at the 6 o'clock, which gives it symmetry, but on a car, there would be no date, so it kind of doesn't make sense being there. So I think this would be better as a dateless watch, but then again, a lot of people do want a date, and it's a very small compromise. And I have to say, my favorite part about this watch is the dial. So you have that hand stack. That second hand has a cap on it, which looks really good. And then you have lume on the hands. The hands are fence post hands. All of these are meant to look like they came from the instrument cluster. You also have a ring that goes around the center of the hand stack, basically, and you have the logo within that. That is probably the major design element, and there's sort of a secondary design element here as well. You have these concentric rings. It's almost like a record style dial where the indices are. So those indices are printed on the dial. It's a 12-hour dial, and the 6 o'clock is actually the date. There is no 6 o'clock index. It takes the place of that index. The track goes from 7 all the way over to 5, and there is no track at the bottom of the dial. At the bottom of the dial, it says the name of the brand. So all in all, a really good looking dial that looks very detailed, and because of that, it looks expensive. And then you have a vintage style boxed sapphire crystal. The case is around 39.5 millimeters. The bezel itself measures in at around 36 millimeters. So it gives it a very vintage look. And what they were doing here was trying to give you the profile that looks like the eyebrows from the 300SL. The eyebrows are the little arches that go over the wheel wells. And I think they pull it off really well. When you flip it over, you could see it looks like that. It looks like those little arches. Now, I'm not sure that's very hard to pull off because obviously, it's the side of a watch. It looks like an eyebrow to begin with, but I give them credit here. It does look very good. And then again, the crown is shaped like a radio knob from the dashboard of the 300SL. However, the crown is probably the biggest sticking point for me about this watch. We'll get back to that in just a few minutes. There are a few problems with it. But all in all, I think it's a very cohesive design, and it doesn't scream automotive design. It sort of looks like an elegant watch. And the bracelet is pretty elegant as well. It tapers. I would like a little bit more taper on it, but I think it tapers pretty well. You have polished mid links. It's an H-link bracelet, and it comes to a butterfly clasp, which has a double push button, and you have a little shield here with their logo. Polishing on the sides and brushing on the back of the bracelet, and it's very interesting bracelet design. There is, if you notice on the sides, there are no holes for pulling the links out or any screws or anything like that. There is actually just spring bars. So there's on the underside spring bars, and you could remove each one of those links. So it's all held in with spring bars, something that I don't think I've ever seen. Pretty interesting design. The only thing I would say that's a little bit on the, I wouldn't say bad side, it's a little bit hard to use, is the crown. You're getting 100 meters of water resistance in this watch, so you're getting a screwed-in crown. However, the crown itself is almost like a canister, and it's really hard to grip because of the style of the crown. It's really hard to grip, and it's really hard to actually screw back in. So I'm not sure if this is going to be changed for the production model. I would say that's probably my biggest gripe about this design. It's a nice crown. It's 6 millimeters. It feels pretty nice when you're using it, when it's pulled out. However, it's when it's screwed in or when you have to screw it in or screw it out, that's when you run into the difficulty of using it. The bezel is polished, it's faceted. You have a curved case or a slightly curved case, so you can see that the bezel is flat. Looks really good in profile, especially when you have it on wrist. I think it looks really, really good. This is getting a Swiss Sellita SW200. You have a screwed-in case back. You do not get quick release on the bracelet. I do want to mention that as well. The case back is polished. The back of the case is brushed. You have a sapphire crystal. You can see the movement from the back. It is screwed in because you do get 100 meters of water resistance. The rotor is not signed. At this price, I would like to see the rotor signed on the Sellita SW200. Again, this is a prototype. I have no idea if they will sign that in the production model. I would like to see it signed at this price point. I think it makes a lot of sense, and we'll talk about price in just a second. On my wrist today, I have the new Depthmaster Orange. This is from Nevada Grenchen. What a really beautiful, very rugged little watch. Gets 1,000 meters of water resistance, which is a pretty serious watch packed into a pretty compact case. Just lug to lug and case size and everything. It's even really not that thick for having 1,000 meters of water resistance. There it is on my 7.5 inch wrist. This is a 39.5 millimeter watch. It's around 36 millimeters at the bezel. You have about a 45 millimeter lug to lug, and that's including the bracelet, which has female end links. And then you have it around 11.3 millimeter thickness and a 6 millimeter crown. I have a 7.5 inch wrist. It wears sort of like an integrated bracelet watch because the end link is actually smaller than the last link on the bracelet. It is meant to sort of line up with the case, which I think it does pretty well. However, that may not be for everyone because this will wear slightly larger than the 39 millimeters or 39.5 millimeters. I would say it wears like a 41 millimeter watch, maybe a little bit smaller, but somewhere in that neighborhood. Well, there you go. Lume is not incredible, but there is lume on here. Technically, I would call this a sports watch because you are getting 100 meters of water resistance. I would like to see slightly brighter lume. I don't think you need more lume, and maybe a little bit of lume on the second hand. That's about it. Other than that, I think this is a very good looking watch with a really cool design, something very, very original. They're charging $925 for this. For such an original design and all the thought that went into it, I think it is a pretty good price. However, there are a couple of little flaws that I would correct at that price, and then I think it would be really worth it. Number one is that crown. I think it needs to be a little bit grippier, a little bit easier to use. And number two, I would sign the rotor on this watch because it is a really nice watch. It just makes it a little bit more interesting when you turn over the watch and you actually see that they took the care to sign the movement, especially at $925. I believe they are currently on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. I will put a link down in the description. Definitely check them out if you're interested. This is a good looking watch, and if you like the inspiration, if you like the Mercedes 300SL, this has a lot of that inspiration. I think it looks really cool. You can see that the lume is not hung on very long. The lume is not very bright, but again, I guess that would be a third correction that I would make to this watch. Other than that, I think it's a really great watch. Tell me what you guys think down in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. Please also don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It's really helpful for the channel, and I very much appreciate it. I'll put a link to Treiber's website down in the description below. If you are interested in this watch, definitely check them out. Anyway, guys, thank you for logging on. I'll catch you guys in the next video.